Hey, Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Good to have you with us. Busy show. John STINCHCOMB on the way. By the way, great stuff from Friday with John STINCHCOMB. We'll tell you more about that when he shows up here in a little bit, recapping spring practice, pro day, everything else. Some bad news from Georgia over the course of the weekend. It looks like at least somewhat bad news in Kenny McIntosh's injury, but we'll kind of talk about where Georgia goes from there on that, where McIntosh himself may go on all of that as well. Of course, we'll celebrate the Lady Dogs today, getting ready to go against the Dragons of Drexel at noon. And speaking of Dragons, we'll have an update on Jefferson High School standout Malachi Starks, who's getting close to a commitment decision. And that, my friends, was a professional broadcast segue. Thanks for being here. Gonna have a fun show. Glad to have you with us. DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So anytime you got, full contact football taking place, you have the risk of a little bit of an injury situation. And apparently over the weekend, that's what Georgia is dealing with. No way to know, how serious this is going to be and, in terms of impact on the fall. But DawgNation, our buddy Mike Griffith, did report over the weekend that Georgia running back Kenny McIntosh is going to miss spring practice, the remainder of spring, Mike says, because of an elbow injury that he sustained. McIntosh did share a photo of this on his Instagram feed of himself and the elbow injury there. He was obviously disappointed about that, and you can certainly understand all of that. And where that kind of leads you with is a couple of things here. First of all, and listen, I don't take pleasure in saying this, but it's obviously true, and it has always been obviously true, that a lot of Georgia fans would look at the situation with Georgia at running back and say, oh my gosh, there are too many running backs. You've got James Cook and you've got Zamir White. They're coming back as seniors. You've got Kendall Milton. He's about to be a sophomore. We want to see more of him. And Kenny McIntosh, when people have seen flashes of him, they say, wow, he has a chance to be a really dynamic player, and I'd like to see more of him. And then Dajon Edwards gets his moments near the end of last season and late in games especially, and Edwards really looked pretty good to me for a true freshman. You'd like to see more of him. And there's all these running backs that people want to see more of, and when you've got as many seemingly good ones as Georgia does, there's this fear that there's going to be an odd man out. There's going to be somebody who doesn't get as many carries as obviously that player wants, or maybe the more objective analysis may say that player needs, and it can seem kind of like a little bit of a problem. But as I've said before, listen, these things when it comes to a running back position, because it is a position that challenges your durability. It is a position where injuries are just a factor. They just kind of always have been, and they kind of always will be. Because of that, the notion that you have too many good running backs, the season has a way of challenging that notion. The season has a way of making you glad you've got each and every one of them. So honestly, I'm not a doctor. I have no idea the elbow injury that apparently McIntosh is dealing with, how long that will keep him out beyond spring practice. Mike says it'll be for the remainder of spring practice. But it's just certainly a factor that teams like Georgia are going to deal with. And when McIntosh comes back and he's healthy again in the fall, the odds are at that point in time somebody else will probably be dealing with something, because that's just kind of the way that it goes with running backs. But there's also this, and I think this is really interesting, that with Georgia now seemingly subtracting a running back off its spring roster, at least in terms of healthy availability, that we thought it would have, all of a sudden you now kind of wonder, well, what does this mean for Lavassier Carroll, the lone running back signee for the class of 2021, who had really a great final season there at IMG Academy down in Bradenton, Florida, but has been working with Georgia, with its defensive backs thus far this spring. And in fact, when Georgia released its numbers for freshmen, he was wearing number 12, and Brock Vandegrift was wearing number 12, which seemingly prohibit them from being on the field together at the same time. You can't have that on the same side of the ball at the same time. So it sort of seems like, well, Carroll may really be a defensive back right now. This may be a little bit more of an experiment than you remember 2 springs ago, the last time Georgia had spring practice, when Walter Grant was giving it a shot there at running back. This may seem to be a little bit more substantial in terms of a true experiment than that. So, is there a chance that Georgia now says, well, with McIntosh injured, maybe you need that extra running back in Lavassier Carroll? I don't necessarily know that's exactly what Georgia's thinking. Prior to the McIntosh injury, when Kirby spoke with reporters last week, he was kind of asked about, hey, how is it going with Carroll at defensive back? And what are you guys thinking about all of that? And Smart gave a pretty interesting answer to exactly why someone with the athleticism of Carroll, someone that Smart says could be a factor on special teams this season, why playing a spot like defensive back might be a valuable place for him. This is actually really good stuff from Kirby Smart. Take a listen to this.
It's experimental. We recruited him as a running back. We're really deep at the running back position. He's probably going to be a factor on our team on special teams because we think he's really fast. He's embraced the position. He's made some good plays. He's had some bad plays. He's not played this position. So to put him out there on some experienced wideouts and some guys who played a lot of football, it's probably not fair to him. But that's how you grow and that's how you get better, by failing. And I've been around a lot of good running backs. I've had running backs that I signed, other places I've recruited that texted me and said, man, I wish I had played corner based on what these guys are getting paid and how many of them are getting paid in the NFL. The shelf life of a corner is much longer than a back. And there's a lot more corners active in the NFL than backs.
So I have joked about this before, given my athletic history and given just the sort of athletic genes I have imparted on my son, the chances are he will not be sifting through offers from SEC schools in terms of where he wants to play his college football. But if he were, I've always been a believer that the advice I would give him would be to kind of take more of a contrarian approach to your athletic career. In fact, I probably do some of that kind of stuff, with him anyway at the level, that he actually is. My daughter there as well. The contrarian, idea of every recruit kind of wants to play the most glamorous version of whatever position that he could play, the kind of the sexiest version of that, right? If there's a choice for an athlete on offense or defense, I mean, you guys read the interviews at DawgNation.com all the time. All the guys want to play offense, right? If there's a choice between being a cornerback or a safety, everybody wants to be a cornerback. Between a guard, center, or a tackle, everybody wants to be a tackle. Like, whatever group that you're in, there's just a more glamorous version of that position within that group, and obviously everybody wants to do that. But as Kirby Smart just said right there, listen, if you got a choice between playing running back, which has kind of always been a glamorous position, especially at a place like Georgia that kind of fancies itself as RBU, or a spot like defensive back, which from a perception standpoint might seem a little less glamorous, but the truth is can lead to a long NFL career. Honestly, making the choice to play the less glamorous position could be a long-range win for you in terms of what everybody wants to do who plays at the UGA SEC level, which is make big-time bucks at the NFL level. Sometimes choosing to play the less glamorous spot might actually be a fairly smart move, which kind of brings you back to Carroll here. I don't know what his long-term future is. I watched a lot of the highlights that he put together as a running back last year at IMG Academy. He seems like the kind of guy that could play that position and play it well, but as I said before, seemingly being at the kind of defensive back spot, which from a perception standpoint is less glamorous than running back, if you've got the kind of athleticism that Carroll has to potentially choose between two positions, that's the kind of spot where you can be really successful. So ultimately, to go back to the question that started all of this, will Georgia now reconsider Carroll as a defensive back now that McIntosh is injured? Assuming it's a short-term injury for McIntosh, that may not be something that Georgia needs to worry about too much with Carroll. And frankly, I kind of want to see this experiment play itself out to see where it goes. I mean, listen, I'm on record on this show years ago saying something that seems pretty foolish now, but maybe didn't seem quite so foolish then. When Georgia spent the 2016 year kind of apprenticing McCole Hardman at defensive back, giving him a shot to do that, I was on record saying that was an experiment worth going after because had Hardman been a lockdown cornerback, obviously he'd have been incredibly valuable to UGA. And as it turns out, he's a great wide receiver at the NFL level, so maybe that was an experiment that didn't work out too well. But I didn't have a problem with Georgia doing that with Hardman then, nor do I have a problem with them doing that with Carroll now, even though Kenny McIntosh is going to be a little banged up, it seems, for just a little while. With that said, let me kind of shift gears and go in a completely different direction here for a moment. I also want to go back to something else that Kirby Smart said when he met with reporters a few days ago. At that time, Georgia was just completing its second spring practice, had a couple more since then, including being in full pads over the course of the weekend. So we're kind of really heating up with the crucial moments of this early phase of the preparation process for the 2021 Bulldogs. And one of the things that'll be interesting to hear, if we do hear from Kirby Smart again very soon, is if what he said a few days ago continues to kind of ring true even after a few practices, including a practice in full pads. We highlighted one example of this from the SEC Network last week, the notion that right now, because of the continuity year over year with coordinator, quarterback, and so many other areas of this offense, that the offense is ahead of the defense for a moment, and perhaps maybe even setting the tone for Georgia during these spring practices. When asked directly about the quarterbacks, JT Daniels included last week, Smart once again kind of reaffirmed that idea. Let me give you a reminder from Smart from last week.
I mean, they're just light years ahead of where they were. I mean, we didn't have this last year, so I can't even answer that question because we didn't know anything last year. We didn't know who we were. We had no identity. We didn't even know who JT Daniels was right now. And we're just we're a lot different offensively. I mean, they're doing things that they weren't doing until maybe halfway through the season last year, and they're doing lots of them.
So Smart says that about the quarterbacks, saying that about the wide receivers as well, although acknowledging, because there's some cross-training going on, that some of these guys are experiencing a little bit of growing pains. Kirby again.
I mean, we got some young wideouts swimming. We've got some experienced wideouts that are still swimming because they're trying to learn multiple positions. Last year we weren't able to be very multiple because Jermaine Burton learned one position. We're trying to get Jermaine Burton to know both sides. He was the Z last year. He needs to be the Z and the X. There's just so many little things that they're so much further ahead as far as knowledge. And I don't know, since I've been here, it seems like we've had a really experienced defense a couple times, and I feel like we've had a really experienced offense. Maybe that the one year when Fromm, it seemed like a lot of the guys were back, but we didn't have our wideouts back. So it's pretty unique to have that much experience on offense. And I mean, it showed for 2 days. We've been behind defensively and been ahead offensively.
As I said before, it'll be interesting to see when Smart speaks again if the defense is kind of catching up to the offense, at least in his mind, based on what he's willing to share. But the one question I have for Kirby on this, and it's hard to know, search your soul and know the answer to stuff like this, but I think as someone who sees what the very best teams in college football have done in recent years in terms of the explosive offenses that have led to national championships, the fact that the offense is ahead of the defense right now for Georgia, at least when Smart spoke a few days ago, to me ought to be treated as a good thing, given how much big-time passing attacks have aided recent national champions like Alabama last year, LSU the year before. The offense setting the tone for these spring practices ought to be viewed as a good thing. But this is still the SEC. This is still Kirby Smart, who kind of has, grown up with a father who was a great high school coach, grown up around Nick Saban in his own coaching world. And I would imagine there's a little bit of a tough transition in your own mind to view it as a good thing that the group that's setting the tone, that's establishing the rhythm of these practices might be the offense, might be quarterback, might be wide receiver, might be the coordinator on that side of the ball, Todd Monken. But if Georgia's going to join the ranks of the very best teams in college football, there is a degree to which that kind of needs to be true. And thus far, it seems like, at least based on what Smart said the other day, it kind of has been true. We'll see if that continues to be the case as spring practice moves on. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, podcast platforms all over the place, the Apple Player, the Google Player, Spotify, world-famous DawgNation.com. Many of you listening right there on SoundCloud. However you get to us, just really appreciate you being with us here today. Of course, radio normally on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We are preempted there on the Classic City on the radio today. Lady Dogs basketball at noon. Looking forward to that against Drexel. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the show today, but no radio for us in Athens. Look forward to being back on Tuesday there. For that, and of course, all of it today brought to you by our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. You know, Pella can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. Such a nice thing to think about this time of year when air conditionings are starting to come on, and you want that cool air to stay inside your house, not escaping out. Also, you love the curb appeal improvements that come from better windows and doors. That's a fun thing there as well. It's great value. It's just great aesthetic. It's everything that you want, and it's great savings there as well. Between now and April 1st, you can get 10% off an entire project or no payments, no interest for 12 months. Couple ways for you to get in touch. It's the website pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That ought to be easy to remember. pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That'll get you in touch, or give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. That'll get you in touch with Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We're going to get John STINCHCOMB here coming up in just a moment. A recap of spring practice up to this point in time. A very interesting look from John at a couple of the key players in the Georgia roster. We will do all of that here coming up in just a moment. Before that, I do want to go around the doghouse because this is actually a very big week for UGA recruiting, or at least the potential is. You hope that it is anyway, because there are a lot of key names who've decided to postpone their decisions because in June it seems like the NCAA is going to open the door for visits to take place and a little bit of a return to normalcy for the recruiting process. And a lot of recruits who were thinking about making commitments have decided, no, let me wait on my decision. Let me take a few visits first. One guy, though, who apparently does not feel the need to postpone any longer is the terrific athlete out of Jefferson High School, Malachi Starks, who is commonly thought to be a defensive back at the college level. He is going to make his decision on Thursday. 5-star name, big-time potential get for UGA, but also big-time competition there as well. A lot of folks have thought that Clemson was a major player in all of this for Starks. Starks wouldn't mention the schools by name that he's down to, but when he met with DawgNation, our buddy Jeff Sintel, and of course Connor Riley was on hand for this too, when he met with him on Sunday at a recruiting event that took place just outside of Atlanta, Starks did say that he's ready to make his decision. Let me just say this real quick about the audio here. This is obviously audio from the field. It was a windy day yesterday. You're going to get some of that wind in here, and of course the kind of faint hip-hop music that seems to always be playing in the background at every one of these recruiting events there as well. So this is not perfect audio quality, but I do want to give you a little bit of a teaser of what you can get more of from the full video at DawgNation.com. This is Jeff Sintel.
I'm excited. It's been a long journey. It's kind of been a crazy ride for me. I'm really excited.
Have you figured this out yet?
I haven't. I thought I did, and then I thought I didn't. I'm really close, but to say I have one school right now, I would be lying.
What are you still? Are you circling among two? Are you circling among all three?
I'm circling among two.
So he says he's down to 2. He's excited about making his decision. Really, the full video is worth your time. And for whatever reason, sometimes the win stuff sounds more pronounced when you play the audio on here than it does when you watch the full video. So if you go to the DawgNation YouTube page, you can see the full video that Jeff did with Malachi Starks you just heard from there. And great story from Jeff about this at DawgNation.com as well. And as I said before, I guess my presumption is the 2 that Starks is down to is Georgia and Clemson. Obviously talked a little bit about Alabama in this video there as well. And it was really pretty insightful for Starks about kind of, how he feels like he's going to be used. And, he wants to, honor his father with the commitment date that he's making. So it's a pretty insightful interview all the way around. And for Georgia, that is kind of in the midst of a 2021 recruiting cycle that's really heating up, Starks is certainly an example of all that. So make sure you check that out. And by the way, speaking of the DawgNation YouTube page, boy, if you haven't signed up to become a DawgNation YouTube subscriber, this is something you're really going to want to do because in addition to this show each and every day, and I certainly appreciate you tuning in and watching us, as I said, great recruiting stuff with Jeff, Starks from yesterday, all kinds of recruiting stuff going on there. Our buddy Mike Griffith, Connor Riley, contributors to the YouTube page as well. All the UGA press conferences from Kirby and Georgia players, it's all there as well. It's the best way to get the most UGA stuff is right there on the DawgNation YouTube page. If you haven't signed up to be a subscriber and if you haven't turned on those notifications, make sure you do that today. One of the things you saw on the DawgNation YouTube page on Friday was the debut of a brand new show. It was DawgNation Freeze Frame, incredible analysis from John STINCHCOMB on Jordan Davis this past week, but having talked to John a little bit over the weekend, I get the sense the best maybe yet to come in terms of what's coming next on all of that. So let's talk about that so much more with John as spring practice kind of heats up for Georgia, and we look to see what's next as Georgia gets ready for G-Day. That and so much more here with John STINCHCOMB on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to John STINCHCOMB here. Great work, as I said, DawgNation Freeze Frame from Friday, and we'll talk about that, what's coming up in future weeks on that program. Before that, John, let me just say hello to you. Hope you enjoyed your weekend, and we certainly appreciate you back with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia today.
Hey, good morning. We got Georgia practice in football. The weather's turning into actual spring here in Georgia, and I was able to catch some fish yesterday. So all things are looking up for me, sir. Hope the same for you.
That sounds like a pretty full weekend right there, and a pretty good one all the way around. Not quite as good a weekend for Georgia running back Kenny McIntosh. DawgNation, Mike Griffith has reported that he's going to be out for the rest of spring practice. McIntosh did share a photo of himself with an injured elbow there. And, John, what I said before you joined us is a couple of things. First of all, we obviously wish McIntosh well on a speedy recovery, and maybe indeed he will be healthy and ready to go, certainly not too long from now. At least that's what you hope. But here's the thing about running back depth, John. Normally over the course of a year, you end up being pretty glad you have it, right? Because this is a position, because of how physical just the job requires you to be. You have injuries there along the way, whether they be contact or whatever else. And in Georgia's case, having some depth to absorb, McIntosh being off the field for a little while is probably going to end up being a very good thing, is it not?
It is, and it's great for Georgia. It's great for the team. I don't know if it's great for Kenny McIntosh. He's missing out on some reps that are important once you get a room full of guys that are capable, and coaches are trying to figure out what fits. Now, the good news is it's just spring football, and I say just as in, if you're dealing with an injury, if there's something that's of a personal matter that you need to work through or work with rehab, now is a much better time to do it than August. It can be pretty costly if you're in the middle of training camp as compared to spring ball when you're dealing with something that might last only 2 or 3 weeks. Well, those are important 2 or 3 weeks. I think you look back and think JT Daniels this past year and the fact that he was still in his rehab and probably wasn't able to compete during training camp the way he wanted to. It's a heck of a lot more significant when it happens that time of year than when it happens in March. So it's a great thing that Georgia still has the depth that they do and the talent that they do. There's not a significant drop-off when you lose a very talented junior running back, and you still have a stable full of guys that include the likes of Zamir and Cook and some of the younger guys like Dejan, and it's a packed room, Milton included. So that's probably also why you're seeing Mavassier getting reps in other places, just to diversify. And if you've got talented guys, you're trying to find ways to get them on the field. And he's long term probably does project as a running back, but with the returns of Cook and White, there might be opportunities that he can help the team in other places, and once that position opens back up and he's moving up on the depth chart, you can see some movement there as well.
I want to ask you about Carroll in a moment because I'm curious about your opinion on that, but one more thing on McIntosh and the running back situation before we completely turn the page on that. This is potentially an uninformed opinion, so maybe you'll correct me and tell me I'm wrong, but when I think about offensive positions, I think about offensive linemen needing to play together. There's a chemistry that goes along with that. I feel the same way about wide receivers working with quarterbacks. There's a certain chemistry. We're all watching a lot of basketball right now. Basketball players have to learn how to not just play, but play with their teammates. That's in my mind, kind of a chemistry sport. I think about, offensive line, wide receiver, quarterback, kind of the same thing. For whatever reason, I've never quite felt the same way about running back. My assumption is that's a position that's a little bit less about chemistry of who you play with and more about just toting the rock and going and getting positive yards. I'm oversimplifying, obviously, but would you say that running back, in terms of if you do miss spring, you're maybe not as far behind because of that as you might be if you're a receiver not getting those reps with a quarterback, or a lineman not getting those reps with the other four guys you might be playing with?
I think that's probably fair. I think, if anything, the chemistry needs to occur between the running back and the coordinator. You start seeing plays that you like with specific guys, and not just this is our outside runner, this is our inside runner. There's a lot of different nuanced plays. Maybe this guy reads the power better. It's an inside run, but it's more of a man scheme. Or this player runs better with a lead blocker. He sets up his blocks better. Similar concept, but just the execution and the play sets that you like with a player. I think that just comes with reps. And so, if anything, if you're looking for points of chemistry, it probably comes more for a running back with the plays that are called and what really highlights what he does best, as compared to, the most obvious choice there is offensive line. You have to be able to work with one another, and it just takes a number of reps, whereas running back, he's got good vision, he's got good speed, let's create some holes for him, and he can hit it. So I think that's a fair assessment, that running back probably doesn't need the chemistry that a quarterback and a wide receiver does and that offensive line does.
So I said this before you joined us. In light of the McIntosh injury, we were talking about Carroll not playing running back right now, playing defensive back. And I said, if you're a potential SEC running back who has the opportunity to play a different position, that's potentially a good thing for you, because you're bringing a rare level of athleticism to that new position. Let's face it, SEC running backs are pretty pristine from the athleticism standpoint. So you're bringing that level of athleticism to a new position, and it's potentially good for Georgia there as well, because once again, you have someone who, at a place like Georgia, there are few positions more premium than what running back has been over the years. A potential running back playing defensive back is, as I said before, that's a pretty nice luxury to have in a program. So I've kind of given my stamp of approval to the experiment of Carroll at defensive back right now. What do you think of those kinds of position switches?
Well, I think it's great, because you're trying to get a guy on the field. I mean, if from a team standpoint, you're saying, here's a guy who's got some skills that, is in a position where we've got some returning veterans that have proven themselves, and he probably doesn't have a lot of opportunity there right now. But down the road he will, and until we get down the road, how can we figure out a way to, one, keep him engaged, and two, help this football team? If he brings a skill set to the table that we can utilize, even in a supplementary role, in a complementary role to the other guys we already have in a position, why would we not do that? It's both a selfish and selfless decision. Selfish in that, man, I want to play. I want to get out there. How can I do that? And selfless, if it's not at the primary position where I see myself long-term, how can I help the team right now? And I think it's a great way to get your talented players out on the field. We've seen it in other ways. I mean, most recently, Notori is a guy that, he came in as a guard, but he said, if my team needs me taking some reps at defensive tackle, that's what I do. That's what I'll do.
Yeah.
Now, it's probably more translatable at some of your athletic positions. A running back that understands the game and has athletic ability, most high school players play both ways anyway. So he's probably already got reps on the other side of the ball and can translate those skills pretty well.
We're talking about Pro Day just for a moment, and I want to ask you about all the guys that were participating, but I still can't get over the idea that Ben Cleveland ran a 4.85 Now, I know he didn't do as many bench press reps as he wanted to, but honestly, had he done 50 bench press reps, I still think the idea of him running a 4.85 is still a more amazing athletic feat. Now, the honest truth is I have no idea how that translates to the NFL world or not. There are not going to be very many moments when he will be running 40 yards on a football field. But, John, Ben is one of the largest guys you could ever be in a room with. He's noticeably big. I mean, shockingly big if you're standing face to face with him. The idea that he's running that fast is, to me, a pretty miraculous feat. Whether it matters on a football field or not, it's just a source of curiosity more than anything else to me.
It certainly is. I think it's official, and I'm not trying to rain on his parade, because hear me say, I think it came in at like 5.0 5'0" at his size is still incredible. I mean, this guy is a massive human, and I have been around him, and I've been around a lot of big folks, and he sticks out. I think that's probably why, for one reason or another, he found a way to rip his shirt off in the middle of a pro day to show that he's not a sloppy mid-300s guy, which is a rarity. I mean, for a man his size to move the way he does and look the way he does, he certainly passes the eye test. It reminds me of the old bus team from the Oakland Raiders, where they're one of the biggest, prettiest teams that they could field. They hop off the bus, and everybody's going to turn their attention to them because, man, they look good on the hoof. And Ben Cleveland certainly qualifies for that category. I mean, he's a guy that I think we all knew how strong he was. I was certainly impressed by that 40 number. I mean, it shows that he's got the athleticism. Sure, it's straight line running a 40, but man, that's impressive for a man his size. That was a great day for him. He certainly helped himself.
So just to quickly recap some of the other news that's out there, it certainly seems like Azeez Ojulari didn't do anything to dissuade people from believing that he's a surefire first-round pick. And if anything, Eric Stokes probably helped his cause by running another fast 40 time on his own. I mean, this is a guy that I would think most scouts would have to say has pretty good game film here. And he backs it up with pretty good numbers at a pro day thing like this. And it seems like Tyson Campbell's kind of right there in the mix there as well. Any other key takeaways that you had from that pro day experience?
Well, Stokes sticks out to me probably the most just because his game film matches that pro day that he just had. I mean, what an impressive day. You watch his film, it's impressive. You see him on the hoof and see his numbers, his metrics off the field, and they're impressive. So certainly helped himself. I think Azeez secured his rankings in that mid-first round guy. He helped himself. I felt for Richard LeCounte a little bit because we've seen his ability on the field and know his playmaking ability. And his 40 number for a safety wasn't great, and you wonder if that was still injury related, but at the end of the day, he's a football player. You turn on the film and you like what you see in his potential and what he can bring to the table. But I think across the board, what we saw is Georgia continues to have some of the best athletes in the country. Tyson Campbell's another guy who, he's going to be a pro day warrior, somebody who lights up the metrics category and, at times has combined that with the film, but doesn't have the same pedigree that Eric Stokes has on the field. But if you're a GM or you're a scout, you're going, man, there's a lot to like about just the athlete that he showed himself to be this past week. So a lot of dogs really helped themselves with their pro day.
I saw where Daniel Jeremiah, who I probably respect as much as anybody when it comes to these guys talking about draft stuff on TV, actually on Twitter came to LeCounte's defense a little bit that he still thinks he's a player, even though he had a bad pro day. And I imagine for Richard, it's probably nice to have someone like that who does have a pretty big following kind of coming to your aid there in terms of backing up what you did on the football field. And probably frustrating for him. He is not healthy right now. He did have, the unfortunate accident away from the sport. And, I do think it's probably one of those things where if you're LeCounte, you're frustrated because you do feel like you've put good stuff on game film. And right now people are talking about things other than that. I have no doubt that's probably a frustrating conversation for someone like LeCounte to be a part of. And frankly, there have been Georgia guys over the course of the last couple of years who've kind of dealt with the same thing of, hey, watch what I did on a football field. Let's not talk so much about, kind of the what was used to say the combine was the underwear Olympics. I mean, let's not do so much of that and talk more about what's happening on the football field. I'm sure that's what LeCounte wants to pivot this conversation towards.
And I think he can make a really strong case for that. You talk about playing speed. And he wasn't a guy that consistently was out of place deep because, he just didn't have the foot speed. That was not the case. Richard LeCounte was a ball hawk. And there's times where, you think, man, I don't know if he can make that play. And all of a sudden he's coming down with an interception just off athleticism. So I think his game film speaks volumes as to how he plays the games. There's a lot of guys that are fast, but it just doesn't translate very well. They don't recognize quick enough, and they can't utilize their speed. Sure, they're making up ground in recovery, but they're in recovery. they were out of position and are having to make up for it, whereas LeCount, I think, a number of times was relying on instinct and athleticism and was making plays in the best conference in college athletics. So he's a guy that you turn on the film and you see his playmaking ability, and it doesn't match that 40-yard dash on a single day in March. And you just need to do a little more digging. And you watch him play, and he doesn't play slow. So it's not like you're taking a risk on a lesser athlete at a position where, quite honestly, you need to have speed, and that's what he's exhibited when he plays the game. So I think it's more of an anomaly and not a true accurate description of how he plays the game and the speed at which he plays it.
Last thing before we let you go, we debuted a brand new show Friday, the DawgNation video channel. It's a little different than some of the stuff we've done before, but a chance for you to show off your analyst hat a bit. We call it DawgNation Freeze Frame. It's kind of a deep dive, close look at some of the key players on the Georgia roster as they go through spring practice. On Friday's show, we talked about Jordan Davis, and I've made the case that I think that Davis is arguably Georgia's most important player, first of all, because he could have been a first-round pick had he gone into this year's draft, has a chance to even be a better pick than that, top half of the first round, possibly in the 2022 draft. And we have a guy like that who had other options, who chose to be a part of what's happening here at UGA. John, in my belief, there's just no doubt that positively contributes to team chemistry. It was fun to hear your thoughts on Davis on Friday, and I look forward to doing a lot more of that kind of stuff with you as we go through the course of the next few weeks.
Yeah, it was fun because Jordan Davis is a fun player. He's a fun player to watch. He's a fun player to listen to during his interviews. And as a Georgia fan, you're excited because he's coming back. And we have witnessed for the past few years what he brings to the run game and run defense for Georgia. And he is a real difference maker, opens up so many opportunities for the guys around him. We were able to go in depth and kind of take some freeze frames that highlight exactly what he brings to the table. And I'm excited because, as you and I have discussed offline, there's a number of players that I'm excited about kind of taking a deeper dive with the fans and looking at what they bring to the table, where their opportunities are, and what this means for this Georgia football team. So it's a neat series. It's part of my world that I really enjoy, which is taking a deeper look into the game and seeing how guys fit into it and how you can scheme around them and for them to highlight what they bring to the table. And it's going to be a neat series for the fans, too, to learn these players a little more and get excited about what they bring to the table.
I don't want to give too much away here, but give me an idea of some of the other players that you're thinking about highlighting in the upcoming weeks.
Well, yeah, on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, Darnell Washington is a guy that I think fans are excited about and seeing what his skill set is and the different ways that Georgia can utilize him. On the other side, somebody like Lewis Seen, a safety that certainly made a name for himself this past season, but continues to grow and playing alongside Richard LeCount, oddly enough, a guy that we just discussed who's leaving for the NFL and what that transition might mean for him. And then replacing a guy like Aziz Ojulari and looking at how someone like Adam Anderson fits in, what's his skill set, what does he bring to the table, what has he shown so far, and what are the opportunities that he might give defensive coordinator Dan Lanning just based on what we've seen so far. So just three more guys. It's a five-player series. We'll have to keep the fifth under wraps.
There you go.
But certainly there's a number of players that I think we can be excited about and highlight and share with the fans and kind of show what they bring to the table and how Georgia utilizes what they have to offer.
Well, it's a ton of fun to be a part of on Friday. Looking forward to this upcoming Friday there as well. It's 3 p.m. on the DawgNation video channels. We may even have a couple of special surprises related to that coming up on Friday that we'll tell you more about at that time. John, thank you for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. Hope you have a great week, and as I said before, I'll look forward to seeing you Friday for DawgNation Freeze Frame and a whole bunch more fun stuff coming down the line after that.
Looking forward to it, BA. Go Dogs.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So yeah, if you didn't get a chance to see DawgNation Freeze Frame, it was presented by Kroger on Friday. Just go check that out. It's on all the DawgNation video channels, even on the DawgNation Instagram page. So become a follower of DawgNation on Instagram if you haven't. It's only 15 minutes long. We're doing this as a little bit of a shorter show. I don't know if you know this, but I have a tendency to be a little long-winded from time to time. I don't know. Maybe you've noticed that a little bit over the years. This though is not that. This is quick. This is a lot of John. This is only a little bit of me. 15 minutes. We're in. We're out. We're doing it very, very fast. Very, very quick paced. It's really, really fun. And so I hope you'll check out DawgNation Freeze Frame Friday, 3 p.m. We'll tell you more about this as we get closer. Now, in about 5 minutes, I'm also going to make another big announcement because we have another brand new show debuting this week, and I am thrilled about this. I told our podcast audience about this. This was a podcast-only announcement last week, but I'm going to tell the entire world here today. Very fun announcement coming up in just about 5 minutes' time. Looking forward to doing that. Also, SEC Through here in just a moment. Before that, though, quick shout-out to my friends at Merriweather & Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Listen, no one likes the thought of the divorce process, whether it be for you, for someone close to you, whatever else. It can be a scary and confusing thing. And the fact of the matter is, even me saying that word here on our show can almost kind of cause you to pump the brakes there for a moment. It's just kind of a shocking word to hear, divorce. But the fact of the matter is, it is a real-life thing for many of the people in an audience the size of ours. And while I certainly have sympathy for anyone who's going through that, the one thing I have confidence in is that if you do find yourself in that situation, having a strong advocate on your side is just the most important thing in the world. And I have great, great belief that no one's going to work harder for you, no one's going to fight, more strongly for you, and no one's going to have better expertise to share with you than my friends at Merriweather & Tharp. They're your source for Georgia divorce. You can find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That website, theatlantadivorceteam.com, is a great resource for you because it gets you in touch with them. The first step belongs to you to set up that initial consultation. Tell your story to them. Allow them to share feedback with you. And then if divorce is something you truly move on with, then put them to work for you online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Merriweather & Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. So it was a wild weekend in the NCAA tournament over the weekend. And, look, you've got all these, double-digit seeds advancing to the Sweet 16. Shout out to our friends over at Oral Roberts. Great to see them take down Florida. You better believe we're not done with ORU on today's show. We'll certainly mention them prominently for the Golden Shoe late at the end of the show. But that's not the only big surprise, right? You had not a double-digit seed, but Loyola of Chicago now moving on to the Sweet 16 after knocking off Georgia Tech in the first round and then knocking off one-seeded Illinois. A lot of folks will tell you that Loyola kind of got the short shrift when it comes to their seeding anyway, based on some of their metrics coming into the weekend. But they get it done. They move on the Sweet 16. You have Oregon State, the surprise here, kind of a bid stealer out of the Pac-12. Really handled Tennessee easily in round one. They're now moving on the Sweet 16. You have a lot of that from the weekend. And to me, the thing that it reinforces is something that we said in the brief period of time we've talked about basketball in leading to this tournament, is the entire time we were getting ready for March and getting ready for the postseason, I never really heard anyone make a strong case for anyone to win the national championship other than Gonzaga. That Gonzaga was just kind of the darling of the gambling world, darling in the analytics world, and that if you wanted to try to make a strong case for anyone else to win the title, you didn't hear much about that on Baylor. You didn't hear much about that on Michigan or Illinois. I mean, you heard the occasional, little bit of love here and there, but you did not hear a ton of that. So maybe all of the, Syracuse making the Sweet 16 and all the kind of double digits that have moved on to the next round, maybe that's just a reminder of how much parity there is in the sport other than the Zags here at the moment. Of course, Gonzaga does play today. And by the way, I don't know how many of you are like me, but I coached soccer yesterday. I got baseball practice today. I don't just live as plugged in to the NCAA tournament as I once did. This is a very different schedule for the NCAA tournament this year than it's ever been before. Thankful to have it back, but it's a different version of the sport. This morning, I don't quite think I processed the fact there are so many games today. This is like a regular tournament game. 8 total games today, including starting off at noon, the way that we kind of think of the first round used to start off. You got Oregon, Iowa today, 2-7. I mentioned Gonzaga this afternoon around 2:40 Eastern. Oklahoma in a 1-8 battle there. You got UCLA going at 5:15 this afternoon. Creighton in Ohio. By the way, a lot of folks were on Ohio over Virginia. Another double digit that advances. The Bobcats, the pride of Athens, Ohio, gets a chance to go today. Tonight, you've got LSU and Michigan. I like Will Wade's team there. I think that's another potential upset in Colorado, Florida State. So you got a ton of action today. So if you're like me and you spend the weekend chasing around your kids, things like that, you may not be fully aware of the fact that we have loaded tournament action on a Monday today. This is certainly not, I don't believe, happened in my lifetime. And just a very different thing all the way around. So get locked and loaded and get ready to go on that. Let me also give a quick shout out. Speaking of NCAA tournament action, and I wrote about this yesterday at DawgNation.com, kind of on the heels of Coach Joni Taylor making an appearance, last week on DawgNation Daily, that the Lady Dogs against Drexel in the Alamo region there in San Antonio, they get going really just shortly after we'll be off the air here, noon Eastern time for the Lady Dogs out there in the women's tournament there as well. And honestly, I kind of jokingly said, listen, this is a great time to kind of get on the bandwagon. I mean, admittedly, we're obviously football obsessed on this show, and we're thinking about that all the time. But I love having a UGA team involved in, kind of March Madness here. In this case, the ladies' version of March Madness. And I do think that Coach Taylor's got a great personality. She's a great face for Georgia basketball. A ton of fun to have her on the show last week. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to watching this team here this weekend. I'd love nothing more than to see them make that run. It's not the easiest region, but, in comparison to what you could be playing against with like the Stanfords and the Louisvilles and the Arkansas of the world, maybe not as tough as some of the other draws out there as well. So we're rooting on the Lady Dogs. We'll be tuned in to watch them at noon today. We are happily jumping on their bandwagon just in time for the start of March Madness, and we certainly wish them well. Let me do one more thing before we move on here. As promised, let me make a quick announcement. So this is something that I have wanted to do for a long time, and for whatever reason, the timing was just never quite right, but the timing is right now. So a lot of you know that years ago we were part of some other video channels, the SEC Country video channels, where we talk about more than just Georgia football. We talk about the rest of the SEC, and I'm really looking forward to this upcoming Wednesday kind of reintroducing that. We did something on the SEC Country channels a few weeks ago related to some news. At this point in time, I honestly forgot what it was. But the point is that obviously that was a great sign for us that there was still a chance to do some of this kind of stuff. So we're going to do a show called SEC Country Live. I'm going to be talking SEC football, not just Georgia. This is a lot like what we do on the SEC through, right? So we'll be talking about what's happening in Alabama as they get going in spring practice. LSU got going at the end of last week. This is a chance to look at some Georgia, but a lot of the rest of the SEC. It's Wednesday, 3 p.m. We're going to reintroduce a brand new version of SEC Country Live. So it's SEC Country Live on the YouTube page. It's SEC Country on Facebook. Your chance to talk some SEC with us, 3 p.m. this Wednesday. We're going to do it once a week, SEC Country Live. Really excited about doing that. Appreciate the graphics showing that off there. It's going to be a ton of fun, so I'll see you. And I'll tell you more about this, about how you find it, because we have obviously gained a lot of folks here over the course of the last couple of years that have never visited us on the SEC Country channels. But we'll talk about more about that. SEC Country on Facebook, SEC Country online, SEC Country Live on YouTube. We'll see you Wednesday, 3 p.m. for a brand new version of SEC Country Live. Can't wait to do that with you then. All right, as promised, and you're probably not surprised at this, Oral Roberts pulls off the great victory against Florida. I guess my brand at this point is fully established because I start getting all kinds of messages from folks after that happened. And we had a ton of ORU-themed golden shoe submissions. I want to just shout out one here real quick. Let me throw this on the screen. Tyler Bannister sending this. So the PGA Tour... actually, I don't think it was PGA Tour that did the video, but nonetheless, it was from a PGA Tour video of the gator getting slapped in the water and the golfer in this case, which I think may have been Justin Thomas back in the day, if memory serves correct. You have the ORU logo on that. Tyler Bannister sharing that. Our buddy Logan Booker had put that out there on Twitter there as well. Gator going in the water, ORU moving on. We'll give everybody involved in that, including our buddy Tyler Bannister, a golden shoe for that. How about Gator Hater Countdown? 222 days from right now. Georgia does it in football as well. Beat those lousy, stinking Gators. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Of course, we'll take your comments on Facebook, YouTube, anything else. You can talk some basketball if you want to. Obviously, a lot of folks want to talk about spring practice and the like on that. So we will do all of that. I got my old laptop back, so I'll be back on the laptop again for comments soon. But I gotta get signed into my accounts. So for today, we're gonna be on the phone here again. But whether it's phone, laptop, whatever else, it's still R.S. Andrews for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. You can trust them to do all of that. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. Just find them online at rsandrews.com. On Facebook, for a moment, Daniel Aldridge says, "Ho, happy day. Gators are out." You better believe that. Love seeing them go down to ORU. Fun for the folks there. Santiago Diarn says, "Can you give my daughter Heather a special congrats on her acceptance to UGA?" He says, "Daddy cried." You better believe Daddy cried on that one. That's a big-time thing. And I saw our buddy Santiago Diarn and his daughter at a Georgia game. I guess it was it last year or was it 2 years ago? Either way, I knew that she was certainly hopeful to get a chance to go to UGA. And she's gotten that acceptance, which, as many of you know who have college-age kids, that is not an easy thing to do these days. So, Santiago, congratulations to you and your family.
Yes, congratulations to Santiago. That's an awesome achievement. I know me getting into Georgia is one of the happiest days of my life.
And by the way, I should just point out that I never had a chance of getting into Georgia. A lot of you don't realize this. I'm not a UGA grad. I didn't have, even back in the 90s, I didn't have grades good enough to go to Georgia. So to those of you who are good enough to go to Georgia from an academic standpoint, certainly salute to you.
I know at this point you're legally obligated to make fun of Florida for losing to a 15 seed in the second round. Do you have any idea what I would give for Georgia to not just get into the tournament, but to lose in the second round to a 15 seed?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. And listen, I am not proud of the fact that I've been relegated to hater status on the men's side. You know, it's like rooting for Loyola against Georgia Tech, rooting for ORU against Florida, you know, laughing at Tennessee for getting drilled by Oregon State. Like, I'm not proud of that fact that, like, I'm only able to kind of, you know, drink haterade during March, at least on the men's side. I'm not proud of that, but you know what? You'll take what you can get.
I'm just, trying to bring fair and balanced here.
I totally understand. I totally understand that. I would give like the days of Georgia getting upset by Southern Illinois in the second round. Like, those seem like the halcyon days of my youth now in retrospect compared to how long it's been. But obviously, Georgia has a chance to do that next year. And listen, you know, when the tournament comes back, you just remember just how great this event is and how much fun it would be to be a part of this. And like, one more thing I'll say about this. It's like when Oregon State makes the Sweet 16, when Syracuse makes it again after really doing nothing of consequence during the regular season whatsoever, you just sort of reminded it's actually not that hard to be good. Like, these random teams like Oregon State, I mean, who's thought about Oregon State since Gary Payton was in college? Like, these random teams make these Sweet 16 runs. You realize maybe at some point in time it'll be Georgia's turn to kind of catch lightning in a bottle when it comes to all that there as well. Randy Hall says, where did all the items go on the desk? So on Friday, someone borrowed our studio from here at DawgNation World Headquarters Studios to do something else. And so I had to clean off the desk for them. And the honest truth is, I hate to be this way. I was just lazy. I didn't feel like putting it back on. I think I probably will eventually. But somebody wanted to use the desk for something, and so I let them do that. And so I just didn't put the stuff back on the desk. I was a little bit ashamed of myself for not doing it, but I just didn't feel like it. Keith Fold says, I was accepted at Georgia Tech, but had no intention of going there. Just wanted to know if I could get in. Well, there you go, Keith. I like to see that. Let's see what else. Randy Hall says we'll be getting a chortle this Thursday. Malachi Starks is a chortle-worthy commit. There's no question about that. No question about that. Yeah, so I would say that Starks gives you that chortle. Let me do a few more here on Facebook. Matt Rukavina says, I'm a UGA grad, but sincerely doubt I could get in these days. Yeah, I mean, it's gotten harder. Like, I don't fully know all the reasons why, but one of the reasons why Georgia's gotten so much harder is because once the Hope Scholarship really kind of kicked into gear, all of a sudden you had a lot of students who would have gone other places in normal times, or, you know, not normal times, but times prior to that. All of a sudden they're like, well, I can go to fancy pants private school and pay $8 gazillion, or I can go to UGA for free. And obviously Georgia's got a lot of attractive, you know, elements to it beyond just the academic part. So all of a sudden you have a lot of people that would have made different academic choices all of a sudden now saying, hey, Georgia for free is a really good option. That was the other thing. BA did not keep his Hope Scholarship while he was in college either. So So those that are able to both get it and keep it over the course of their time in school, that's a pretty good option. And so when you have the population and pool of students kind of, raising the level of academic performance, before long, the school itself has, a different academic profile than it once did. Now, you can debate, would it be nicer if the school was a little bit more open for, more Georgian, and I certainly think that's a conversation worth having, although probably not on this show. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see Georgia climbing the ranks from an academic standpoint, and it's kind of nice to see how many recruits mention that when it comes to their own recruitment. Moose Thomas says, may I ask a question? Are y'all actually UGA fans, or do you work for UGA? He asked me and Mike Griffith. So Mike is more, I guess, of an objective report. I mean, even Connor, who's a UGA grad, I think Connor would sort of fancy himself as an objective reporter, someone who's here to cover news and be, objective in that idea. Like, I have never tried to do that. I have a Georgia shirt on today. You may notice. I don't work for Georgia. DawgNation is owned by a different company. We're owned by a company called Cox Incorporated, and they own the AJC. So we're not affiliated with the UGA, but we do cover Georgia. And I've been, as I said, not a UGA grad, but a fan of Georgia my entire life. And it was really weird for me when I first started DawgNation. It was like fall of 2015. And I was going to do this show. Back then, we were just podcasts. We were not on video yet. It's one of the reasons why I love shouting out the podcast as much as I do, because when we began, that's where we were. And we have people that listen to the podcast who've literally been listening since the fall of 2015. So a lot of people, thousands of people that have been with us that long. So I love showing them support and respect over there on the podcast side of things. But the point is, I had been a Georgia fan, but it was like, is it okay to do a show like this that is for Georgia fans? And I decided that it was. And so, people say, well, what does that really mean to do, a fan show? Obviously, we don't lie about anything here. If something bad happens for Georgia, we have to admit that and acknowledge that, because eventually you would lose respect for me if I wasn't honest. When good things happen, we are here to celebrate that. When bad things happen, we're kind of here to analyze that. We're not Georgia's mouthpiece. We don't do their bidding the way that their own in-house media might, and they have every right to do that. That's a promotional arm of the Athletic Association. I don't criticize them for doing their own stuff in-house the way they may choose to do it, but we're obviously a little bit different on that because we are independent from them. But honestly, I'm happy when Georgia does well, and it's been kind of weird these last few years, Moose, because I've always rooted for Georgia to win, but now I'm in a position where when Georgia wins, it's actually good for me professionally speaking there as well. I mean, listen, there's no secret that when Georgia's doing well, business is pretty good. Now, thankfully, business is good for us, throughout the entirety of the last few years, but when Georgia was in the playoff a couple of years ago, that was good times from a business standpoint. There's a lot of folks put extra rooms in their house and things like that, based on Georgia making a run to the college football playoff in 2017. So yes, I do root for Georgia. I'm a Georgia fan, but we are independent from UGA here on this. And really the other folks at DawgNation, as I said before, they kind of think of themselves more as Big J journalists. They want to be, that's kind of the vein they come in. And hopefully we make the distinctions on that pretty clear. It's fairly obvious when you listen to, journalist guy talk, and when you listen to, someone who, there's a reason why, and I'll stop talking about the subject after this. Every single day I said we're the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. That's a reminder to me, and hopefully, a signal to you about what the show's going to be about. I'm not, egghead sports writer doing this show for other sports writers. I'm not, someone who's, trying to get up on an ivory tower and talk down to people. This is a show by a fan for other fans, and that's the kind of casual nature of the conversation that we're kind of looking to establish around here. And so, Moose, I appreciate your question. Let me go to YouTube for a moment. We'll come back to Facebook before we're done. And I hope all of you are doing really well. Richard D says, have I always flowed when speaking, or did I have a lot of ums when I first started to speak out? So, Richard, my biggest thing is that I have a tendency to want to speak too fast. And some of you probably noticed that from time to time. And so when I would first get started in radio, people would, kind of notice that and remark on that. And so that's always been the thing that I've had the most difficult time dealing with, a tendency just to kind of get going a little too fast. In fact, you'll notice this, is that for whatever reason, when I'm just by myself speaking, it's a little bit easier for me to control my cadence and speak in a tone that, and at a rate that I want to speak at. Because when I was a kid, I was a very bad stutterer. Like first grade, second grade, I'd have to go to like speech therapy classes because I stuttered real bad. I guess my mom also dealt with some stuttering when she was a kid too. And so I've always kind of had that tendency just to get a little too ahead of myself, a little too rat-a-tat-tat when I'm speaking. And when I'm doing the interviews, sometimes you may notice that when I'm speaking with somebody else, I kind of get going a little faster than I want to from time to time. So I appreciate you asking the question and saying that. It's just one of those things that thankfully I've had a lot of reps. I've been doing this show now for 5 years and did radio, for many, many years prior to that, some television there as well. And so, anything that you really put a lot of effort towards practicing, you're going to get better at over the course of time. And that's just kind of been my story. There's still, when I go back and listen to shows and watch shows, and I try to do that fairly regularly. It's the only way you ever get better at anything. There's still a lot of things about my own performance now that I wish would be a little bit different. But, anything that you practice a lot, eventually you get better at. It's like for me, for like writing, say, for instance, I do write from time to time. I at least put the podcast up every single day and do a couple of other written pieces, usually during the week. And, it's so different for me, right? Because I have been speaking professionally for more than 10 years now, way more than that, 15 years, I guess. I've been speaking professionally, have a lot of experience. Writing, at least for the fact that, that's part of my job description professionally as well. I've only been doing that for a couple of years, and it's amazing just how much more difficult it is. Way more difficult to express yourself, or for me to express myself in the written word, because I just don't have as much practice doing that as I do with the other. It's just kind of interesting to watch how those skills grow and develop over the course of time. Jordan Bowman on the subject of the Georgia-Clemson game. Yeah, I don't think that game's going to move. Eventually, listen, Charlotte's got its own business community to think about there as well. So whatever the scenario may be around North Carolina at the moment, we're still a good ways away from the fall. So I'd be surprised if the game moves. Cody Ledoux says Bama Pro Day's coming soon. That's going to be a good one. No doubt it will be. I saw where Saban had another rant. It was a pretty good rant about linebacker play and guys shifting positions. So Bama just getting going with spring practice, but Saban himself in midseason form already. Jay Shipe said he had stuttering in second grade, dyslexia in third grade. Now I'm a self-entitled genius. Well, there you go, Jay. That's pretty good improvement right there. Let's see what else. Brian Whitehead's daughter, Haley, also got accepted to UGA. Haley, congratulations to you. That's awesome to hear. So I guess these acceptances are going out right now. So, Haley, what a great educational opportunity that's going to be for you. Congratulations to you. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. I'm really proud for you and your family. Breda Pest Management says congratulations to Brandon Sudge on his gig with the AJC covering the women's tournament. Yeah, Brandon has kind of carved out a niche for himself. There is a ton of media covering UGA. Like we mentioned Clemson a moment ago. By comparison, some of these programs that you think of as like really big don't have nearly as much media covering them on a regular basis as Georgia does. And part of that's because proximity to a big top 10, major market media landscape like Atlanta. So it's always kind of good to have your own like niche carved out within what people kind of already think of as a niche as Georgia sports coverage, but there's so much of it. It's almost too big to truly be a niche. You need a niche within that niche. And many of you may know who Brandon is. He's been a UGA student, kind of working his way up the ranks there. But part of the niche he's kind of carved out for himself is I think he really enjoys covering women's basketball. And, yeah, Brandon, as our buddy Matt Breda says, is covering that for the AJC. I think we're going to put his stories at DawgNation.com, too. And he's actually in San Antonio, I believe, for this, right? So there you go. He is in the bubble there in San Antonio. So look for those stories at DawgNation.com later on today. A couple more comments here. We'll get ready to go. J. Ricks 2510 says possibility that game in Charlotte versus Clemson is at full capacity. I think I think there's a chance that it is. And I'll tell you kind of where I come from on this. I guess the Braves have announced that they're going to go 33% capacity for games in April. So if they're opening games of the season, they're at 33% capacity, which is more than we've had for any sporting event up until now, right? We have, I mean, I guess other than maybe MMA's had higher capacity from a percentage standpoint than that, but most of the other sports have been nowhere near 33%. So by kind of raising that level, we're in April talking about that. That gives you several more months to get towards the fall. And I mean, the way this kind of stuff works is you have two things going on. You have the honest assessment of the health and safety standpoint of what's healthy to do, but you also have the perception standpoint of it's tough to make a decision that's wildly different than what other sports entities have made. So you have the health and safety evaluations going on, but you also have the natural human nature tendency to only do a little bit more than what the person before you did. And so baseball at 33% in April, watch golf the last few weeks. And I didn't watch the Honda very much this weekend, but you watch the players, you watch the Arnold Palmer the week before that. They're cheers to these PGA Tour events. I mean, that is back. There are fans cheering, making noise. Golf helps you a little bit on some of this kind of stuff. So you got some movement towards what just becomes a little bit easier to potentially have full fans, full stadium come September. Now, as I said on the show, I think it was last week, part of this is the question of, do you have 80,000 fans in Charlotte that want to be in that stadium? Because last year, had Georgia wanted to sell 93,000 tickets, believe it or not, at least in terms of the normal ticket buyers, there were plenty of people last year that were not ready to come to games. The opt-out numbers give you a little bit of a hint at that. So it's more than just the tickets being available. It's also fans being ready to use them. And as the vaccine continues to roll out, as infection numbers seem to be going down, at least the best that I can tell, consult your own news for that yourself. The odds of actually being a full stadium, I think, are going up a little bit. So we shall see. A couple more here. We're going to get ready to go. Over here on YouTube, trying to figure out what else is there. DMart42 asking about our buddy Mike Johnson. Yeah, Mike is coaching now. So Mike is in that world. He still makes appearances on DawgNation from time to time, but the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson is a coach now, doing a great job doing that. Schuler Thomas says Arkansas needs to be worried about ORU, BA. Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, I guess ORU is a potential threat to anybody. I would say that's probably true. I'd say that's probably true. Over here for a couple more on Facebook, and then we're going to get ready to go. Keith Fold says, I lived at Charlie Williams' cabins. So the only Herschel Walker autograph I have, I got when I was a kid. And I got it on a Charlie Williams Pinecrest Lodge, we call it brochure type thing. So we were there having dinner one night, and this is back in the early 80s when Walker was a player, and he came in. Now, I'm only a small child, so I can barely remember this, but I just remember the hysteria of Herschel Walker walking into Charlie Williams Pinecrest Lodge. And, my mom, kind of got me to the lobby area where he was and kind of got up there to him, and he got ready to sign that autograph. And he kind of I remember this part. He lifted his leg to sign it, kind of, I don't know if he rested his foot on a prop or something like that, but he lifted his leg to sign the autograph, and that gigantic, you can only imagine what, his quads were like, lifting that and signing that autograph there on that. I just remember that was a very big deal for me. And to this day, that's still the only Herschel Walker autograph that I have, but I still have the brochure of that Pinecrest Lodge, Charlie Williams, Pinecrest Lodge, autograph. Lucy Bowers-Boykin asked my thoughts about Isaiah Wilson. Honestly, I'm just really sad about it. For those of you who don't know, Wilson was traded to the Miami Dolphins, kind of a fresh start for him. But I guess the reports were, and I know Connor wrote about this, DawgNation.com, that Wilson had missed some workouts that he agreed to attend and be a part of that. And Miami just did not like what they saw from him, apparently not living up to his end of the bargain, and they had to release him. So that's obviously a big blow to Wilson's hopes of kind of getting his NFL career turned around. And at this point in time, it's not about football for Isaiah. I won't pretend to know exactly what's going on with him, but there's clearly something that's keeping him from being at his best right now. And I have great sympathy for it. I really do. And I just pray that he figures out, what he needs to figure out. And it's just really, really hard sometimes. And you say, well, I'd like to have that kind of struggle, millions and millions of dollars and everything that kind of goes along with that. But, listen, all the money in the world sometimes doesn't change what might be going on between your ears and what might be going on in your heart sometimes. And so I hate it. I hate it. I root for him to find happiness. I really do. And I was very, very sad to hear that he's had another setback. But beyond just him being a football player, I hope that he's able to kind of figure out what he needs to figure out, because clearly there's some stuff going on there, and I root for him, and I hope that he knows. There are a lot of folks around DawgNation. I don't mean the website. I mean the group of us that care about Georgia football. There are a lot of us that are still rooting for him to get it figured out, to find some happiness, to find some peace. So I hope that Isaiah understands that there are a lot of people that value him and have great memories of him and want to see him find something different than what he seems to be dealing with right now. Laura Woodard says, one of my favorite memories, saving money to go to Pinecrest Lodge. Yeah, that was the place for sure. That was the place. Sandy Puckett, thank you for the kind words. We've gone a little long here. We're going to get ready to go. Good to see Steve Shaffini back in the comment section here today. All right, we're going to get ready to go for right now. Hey, thanks for being here. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Y'all make sure you check out the AJC, Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. Good way to stay up to date. I mentioned some of the virus-related stuff. You want to know kind of how that vaccine rollout's continuing, what all that is like and what's going on there. Atlanta News Now, AJC.com gives you a great chance to do that. Also, coverage of the tournament, that's ongoing there as well. You can keep up to date with what has been a wild March thus far. A lot of that going on. And, mentioned mental health stuff a minute ago. Really interesting profile of the AJC there as well for a lot of the students, and this is no secret, we've talked about this openly, a lot of the students who've missed time in classroom, that has put a mental health toll on them. How exactly are some of the systems in Atlanta, like the Atlanta Public Schools, handling that? Interesting story on that, Atlanta News Now at AJC.com too. Plus, new restaurant opening in Atlanta. You can get some of that there as well on the fun side of things. Atlanta News Now, AJC.com. Huge thanks to you being here for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews will show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You need to get your air conditioning tuned back up to factory fresh specs. R.S. Andrews will give you a chance to do that. So find them online, rsandrews.com. Y'all, thanks for being here. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. I look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. YouTube.com/DawgNation.